Welcome to the Life in Norway show. In this episode, I'm doing a deep dive into the world of shopping in Norway with fellow Brit Paul Harrison. Paul lives in Oslo, where he works for the Kelkoo Group. We talk about how shopping habits differ between Norway and other countries, shopping in supermarkets, the state of online shopping in Norway, and a look at how our money and payments are rapidly moving online. You can find out more information about Paul, the Kelkoo Group, and everything else we talk about on today's show on the show notes page. Just head on over to lifeinnorway.net/podcast and look for episode 47. Happy listening. I'm joined today by Paul Harrison. He is the Global Head of Business Development for the Kelkoo Group here in Norway. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Excited to join. Talk about two of my favourite topics, Norway and shopping.
Shopping indeed is the topic of the show today. But before we get onto that, let's hear your story. What brought you to Norway?
So Scandinavia has always attracted me when I was a teenager, fascinated me. I did a lot of travelling in Southern Europe, but I realised that I didn't know much about the cold north. And at the time, it was becoming quite trendy and hot, so to say, a lot written about it. So I was really curious to see it for myself. And I had the opportunity in 2001, actually, with the Lions Club to travel here with their youth exchange program, stayed with a wonderful family called the Bolso family in Hørdal, just near Gardermoen. And I stayed with them and lived as a Norwegian, experiencing Norwegian family life and the traditions, the nature. Got to see Oslo, Tusenfryd, Lillehammer, and just loved it. And then the following year, so 2002, I met my wife, future wife, fell in love, became a love immigrant and made about 30 trips from the UK to Norway over the years. And then finally in 2013, moved here full time as we were starting a family. And it was an easy decision to move, but hard, in fact, to find a job. So as soon as I found a job, that was when we actually made the leap of faith to move over here full time.
Fantastic. You know, Paul, I love hearing people's origin stories because mine is almost always quite different. So many people, they always wanted to move to Scandinavia, but I moved here quite by accident and then found out that I quite enjoyed living here. So it's always nice to hear the differences. You moved here in 2013, but you were taking very regular trips before that. So maybe this is a bit of a difficult question then, but what were the biggest differences between your old life in the UK and when you moved to Norway? I guess it was more of a gradual change than a sudden change of scene.
That's true. It wasn't a shock. I knew what to expect because I had made those, should we say, research trips and had come so many times previously. So the actual reality of living here was quite similar to my life in London. So it's not like I was knee deep in snow, fighting polar bears, looking at the northern lights every day. The routines that I established when I was working in London was quite transferable when I started working here in Oslo for a technology company. And it was more establishing myself from scratch with the friendship group, making sure that I was very active, socializing both inside and outside of work, which was something I loved about living in London. Pub culture, going 2 or 3 times a week with your colleagues for a drink after work, and try to replicate that here in Oslo, which was great. One of the big changes was the very definite seasons that we have here. So the changing of the season. In fact, in Oslo, we have 5 seasons, not 4, because of the spring and the autumn, sort of sandwiched between the very, very intense winter as well. So that was quite special to experience the very clear seasons that we have here versus London, which is always very grey and drizzly throughout the year. So yeah, that was a big change.
There is actually an article on Life in Norway called "The 5 Seasons of Norway." So you've summed it up quite nicely there. But
I'm not sure if I explained it, but maybe people should read that.
Yeah. Before we get into shopping, tell us about Kelkoo. How long have you been working there, and what does the company do? What's your role?
So Kelkoo is one of the real original .com companies. It was established in 1999. And ever since then, we've had a presence, an office here in Norway, which is quite unusual. Actually, we've got 8 offices, and we've always had this connection with Norway and being based in Oslo. One of the reasons is that we've got a fantastic team. So I work with a couple of colleagues that have been in the business for 20 years, which is really unusual in tech and in digital businesses. So we have these great relationships with local retailers and shops. And what we're able to do for them is send them clicks, traffic to their web shops, give them new audiences, new shoppers, and help them to convert those visitors into shoppers. So we're coming into a really important period of the year with Black Friday fast approaching, Christmas as well. And this is when we really work really closely with these retailers to help them to sell more goods.
A lot of people might wonder why we're recording an episode about shopping habits in Norway. I mean, surely they're the same as they are anywhere else. But obviously we've decided to record because that's not the case. There are some very clear differences. And one of the biggest, I think, is especially from how things work in the US, maybe not quite so much from the UK, is the use of cash. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you paid for something with a physical currency here in Norway?
That is a really good question. I'm trying to think. It was probably a month ago, and it was someone selling a magazine outside a shop. So we have a bit like in the UK, The Big Issue, which is a magazine that people sell. Actually, it was the last time that I paid for something in cash.
Yeah, I mean, how it is here in Trondheim, and I'm sure it's the same in Oslo. Market stalls you can pay by Vipps, which is of course the mobile payment service, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So this isn't just about paying your bills online. This is a major difference to how things work in many countries. How long do you think it will be, or do you think we will get to the point where we're cashless?
Well, I think in answer to your question, we're probably already cashless in the example I just said, and I guess it's the same for you, David, in terms of just don't carry cash. But in terms of in Norway, I think we are way ahead of a lot of countries because Norwegians trust the institutions. They adopt a lot of new technology very quickly. So Vipps is a good example of that, paying with your mobile phone. Widely adopted for peer-to-peer payments. So I have someone coming later on to pick up a barnevogn pushchair, and we will do that transaction using our Vipps accounts. So there won't be any cash there in that example. And I think it's been spoken about 2030 is the goal for becoming completely cashless. That's what the government has said. And I think we're on that path. I think Sweden is maybe even further ahead, and they're talking about having their own digital currency, replacing the krona with the e-krona as an alternative to cash backed by the government, which come back to that point about trust. I think the citizens will trust a digital currency if it's backed by the government, it's backed by the central bank. It will have wide adoption. And as soon as these things are adopted at a tipping point, when most of the population are using it, there's no way back. But there are some groups, like elderly groups, that will be slower to adapt and to adopt, and therefore it won't happen overnight, and it will gradually happen up to probably 2030, I think.
Let's talk a bit more about VIPs, because on a recent article about the must-have apps in Norway, I think I placed VIPs top of the list. People might think, yeah, this just sounds like Apple Pay or whatever, but there is a lot you can do with this app. I mean, I get my credit card bill directly in there, and I can hit one button to pay it using VIPs. We have a regular social group of friends, and we're often ordering pizzas. One of us pays, and then each of us just VIPs the other person 100 kroner or whatever. And the great thing about it is you don't need to know the bank account number. You just need to know someone's phone number. And to get VIPs, all you need is a mobile phone number and a Norwegian bank account. So there is a real low barrier to sort of getting into VIPs. But for me, there's one huge problem, and that's for tourism. Because in many places, you can pay, for example, for parking with VIPs. But you can't get VIPs if you're a tourist because you don't have a Norwegian phone number, you don't have a Norwegian bank account. Is there a solution to this problem, do you think?
I think VIPs are very ambitious, so I see they are growing. And so one solution to that problem is VIPs becomes well known and adopted in other countries. So it doesn't become just a Norwegian app, but a European and a global app, which a lot of Norwegian companies are looking outside of Norway for growth and for growing their user base. So on the point of view of adoption, I think that might happen, and we might see VIPs. People come from the UK with VIPs already loaded onto their phone, right? In the same way that we see Klarna having huge growth in the US as a Swedish startup, then a Swedish unicorn, and now a decacorn, huge business. I could see VIPs having that, because you and I probably agree that the user experience is better than Apple Pay. It's fantastic. It's so frictionless, very easy to use, and you can use it to pay for anything. Go to a school fair, and you can just buy a hot dog and a coffee with it, or you can VIPs in the middle of the night, and you don't need to wait for the bank to open. So I think in terms of tourism, it's a great point that you make, and I'm not sure that they've got a solution now, but I think you're right to flag it, and I think that they will perhaps have ways for tourists as well to be able to use it, because tourism is a huge part of the economy in Norway.
If anyone's in any doubt as to the level of adoption with VIPs in Norway, the very fact that we've both used VIPs as a verb when we've been talking to each other, we VIP someone 100 kroner or whatever, that just shows it's in the vocabulary as a verb. So that's all you really need to know.
That's a good point.
Another point I see with shopping in Norway is a difference in the price sensitivity. Now, you'll probably have a view on this given your job. This is just for me as a consumer. I see Norwegians as far less price sensitive than certainly people in the UK. When it comes to going and buying a coffee, it doesn't matter if it's 10 kroner, 20 kroner, 50 kroner. That isn't the deciding factor. Whereas back in the UK, if it was £1, £2, £5, nobody's buying that £5 coffee. They'll buy it if it's £2. Do you recognise this, or am I completely away from reality here?
I definitely recognise it. I think the general feeling I have is that Norwegians are more brand sensitive, quality sensitive than price sensitive. There's an expression that you get what you pay for, and I think a lot of Norwegians would rather buy something that they feel is high quality, is going to have a long life to it, very sustainable, so they haven't got to replace it after a couple of years. Even if it's going to cost more, they would rather wait until it's on sale. Maybe you can pick up some bargains, 25% off, 30% off. We've got Black Friday coming. These are times which, if people are going to make a big purchase, high ticket items I'm talking about, they will wait perhaps until it's available at a discount. And some categories, like for example electronics, they're not actually that expensive relative to places like Sweden, where they can be more heavily taxed or indeed more expensive. So it's funny, coming from the UK for a period of the first 2 months, I was doing the currency conversion and try to save 5 krona here, 10 krona there, and in the end I gave up. And like you say, you just run with, you need a coffee, it's going to cost you 50 krona, and you have to accept it.
That's a good point, actually. That moment where you stop converting in your head, for me, that took a lot longer to stop doing. It was well over a year. You know, whatever circumstance it was, every item I picked up in the supermarket, I would think, oh, this is £2. Though that's quite expensive, which is ludicrous, really, when you think about what's happening there in the decision-making process, because you're not in the UK anymore.
It is, and I had to sort of decouple myself from that, because you go a bit mad with the fluctuating currency exchange rate with the pound, which since I moved here is shot all over, all over the place, up, down.
Sure.
And you just can't compare like for like. So in the end, you have to just accept that's the price here and now where you are in Norway, and you pay it.
Yeah, and I'm sure this has happened to you as well. But when I now return to the UK and I see something costs £5, I have no real idea how much that is. I don't understand the value of £5 anymore. I just don't know. And I never thought that would happen, but I guess, you know, my default now is krona, and everything else is relative to that. And I hear that from a lot of people after they've been here for a few years. They lose that attachment to the home currency and their idea of what's expensive and what's cheap when they go home.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Moving on then, let's look in a little bit more detail at some of the differences. Really, it falls into 2 categories. There's physical shopping in stores, and then, of course, online shopping, which is an expertise area for you. But let's start with physical stores here in Norway. The obvious thing is a supermarket. And again, I see big differences here. So what do you make of supermarkets in Norway, and how do they differ from retailers in other parts of the world?
Yeah, so the first thing is to say supermarkets here that dominated by 4 big players, which really control the choice and the prices as well. And so since I moved here, in fact, those 4 big groups have been challenged by Lidl, which came in as a discounter and tried to disrupt and offer lower prices, more exotic products for the Norwegian market. And it was a massive failure. They left after 4 years, which is the first time they've ever had to exit a market after coming in. And they just found it too hard because they were stocking unfamiliar products. Norwegians weren't keen on buying from this foreign company. There was talk about the labor unions, very political, in fact. And so that was quite interesting to see how difficult it was to disrupt the status quo and the existing supermarket groups that we have. But more recently, seen as well Iceland coming from the UK to do something similar, which is offer exotic products, lower prices, and they're having a bit more success. And I'm following them quite closely. They've got distribution now across every Circle K gas station in the country has now got a freezer in the corner with Iceland products. And for me as a Brit in Norway, that's amazing because I can get my sausage rolls or my Kit Kats and mini cheddars on the road or close by, just 5 minutes away from where I live. So fingers crossed, they're successful. I really hope that they make it work. The other example of one that didn't is Marks and Spencer, which again, the prices were really high, even for Norwegian standards, because of the taxes, because of the additional import charges that especially get levied on food items. So we've seen some players come into the supermarkets here in Norway. Not all of them have been successful. but we welcome innovation. And in fact, from the point of view of, you talk about offline and online shopping, you see Kolonial.no, the biggest online grocer, having a lot of success and a lot of growth and delivering to people's cabins now. So that sort of innovation is really exciting for me to see. And I think they're following the same sort of model as we see with Ocado in the UK. And I hope that they're successful because, again, they're offering choice, convenience, groceries delivered to your door. And I think that that's really taking the challenge to the big groups.
I had actually forgotten completely about Iceland coming to Norway. Mainly that's because I'm here in Trondheim and they're not here as of yet. But it's interesting. I didn't know that they had a presence in the gas stations around the country too. So it does seem that things are looking good there. But one thing we do have in Trondheim, and I know it's the same in many cities, is foreign food stores or import stores, however you want to term them. They typically run by immigrants, typically one family, and they're a very small scale. Here in Trondheim, there are 3 or 4 just on a small grid of streets downtown, and that's where you can go and buy the spicy sauces from Mexico or the grains from the Middle East or whatever sort of international produce you can get. But I find it interesting that there's not many Norwegians that actually use those. They might go there to buy the 10 kilo bag of rice because you can only get the 1 kilo ones in the regular supermarket. But there's not a lot of experimentation going on with all the foreign food that are available in these stores.
That's a good point. And you talk about exotic products, you talk about selection. That's probably the best place you're going to find it, if I'm honest. And whether it's also, Asian supermarkets, we have one in Sandvika, fantastic selection that you just can't find in a normal Norwegian supermarket. So maybe we should encourage some of our Norwegian friends and neighbours to shop more there, because actually that's a great place to find that extra choice.
Outside of supermarkets, sticking with the physical stores, I find the selection of stores here to be somewhat mundane. I mean, you go from city to city and it's the same thing everywhere, especially for clothing. You've got Dressmann, you've got
H&M. You've got Zara here. I'm not sure if you have it in Trondheim. And
yeah.
So that's bringing a little bit more, should we say, choice. Whereas previously, you're right, it was a lot of Norwegian brands, which are struggling, because to be a local, especially with a fashion retailer, it's incredibly intense competition globally for fashion, and especially with everything that's happened this year. I think I see, fashion is under a huge pressure, and we see some chains having bankruptcies and a lot of problems there. So, yeah, I think in terms of more sort of higher end, when we think about luxury goods, we're seeing quite a bit of success in Oslo, whereas before that was unthinkable, really. So if you walk down Nedre Slottsgate in Oslo, behind the Parliament, you've got the luxury quarter, which is a bit like walking down Bond Street in London. So you've got Louis Vuitton, and next year you're going to have Chanel. Bentley's just opened a new showroom in Billingstad. So at the top end, in the luxury end, we're seeing actually that Norway is having quite a lot of growth. And you can look at some of the factors, the macro factors, like high employment, increasing house prices, people have more disposable income, and they're less afraid to perhaps buy luxury goods than before. It could be janteloven, and that feeling of not being more special than your neighbor is kind of changing, and people are a bit more open to buying luxury than they were before. I think that's been something I've noticed.
When I left the UK in 2011, there was a very clear trend of high streets losing those sort of luxury stores. Well, I suppose that had happened a while ago, and pound shops opening in their place. By pound shops, I'm talking about very, very cheap stores where everything is very cheap. Often one particular famous one where every single thing on the shelves cost £1. I've never seen that equivalent really here in Norway. There are some stores that are similar, Nila, for example, and stores like that, but it's not the same concept. And why don't we have that budget end in the physical stores here?
I think the Nila example is a good one, and also Europris has quite a lot of stores which are selling really low cost items at European prices to Norwegian consumers. I'm not sure if there is a level below that. I'm not sure whether the demand is there, because it could be relative to the differentials on income. It could be that, the society in Norway is more equal than in the UK, and that's a cultural feature of the welfare state, and the fact that you don't have those extremes of rich and poor. You have a much more level society. So back to the point of this luxury shop versus a pound shop. In the UK, you'd see that to the power of 10. You'd really see an extreme in terms of the very high-end luxury and the very low-end on cost or price. And I'm not sure that we see that here. But we're seeing that stretch, and we're seeing, as I mentioned, the luxury shops having more success, luxury brands. And perhaps we will see that widening of that gap between rich and poor.
Let's start talking about online shopping then, Paul. This is your area of professional interest. But first of all, I want to get to your personal experience. What kind of online shopper are you? Do you shop from Norwegian stores? Do you shop abroad? Or are you the kind of person that, because of the job you do, you like to get away into a physical store at the weekend?
Well, great question. It's true to say that I spend far too much time on my computer anyway. So when I'm shopping for myself, I do actually quite enjoy going to a physical shop. It's quite novel, and it's nice to actually pick up and see and touch, feel and smell what you're buying, and to speak to the assistants and ask questions, which is a more traditional way of shopping, I suppose, than what you might expect me to say. But regarding that's just a personal preference, I think. I think one thing to say when I'm doing my own shopping, it's all on my mobile, right? So, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm just looking forward to getting a new phone, and hopefully we've got such great connectivity speeds here that trust and that ease of payment, being able to click on something and not even enter your credit card details, just have the invoice sent to you a month later, is very, very, very convenient, super convenient. So I value that. And I think that the rest of the world, when we see 5G rolling out, when we see retailers' websites offering more easier payment options, I think we're going to see more of that. And it's exciting what that brings as well.
I don't want to date this podcast too much, but I do want to get your professional insight on how the pandemic has changed or hasn't changed shopping habits in Norway. What can you tell us about what you've seen from the data you see every day? Are Norwegians spending more online? Are they changing their habits?
During the lockdown period, we saw as much as 40% increase in traffic, so in people spending time online and visiting shops. And so those shops which were well set up and ready to deliver goods were the ones which succeeded, whilst obviously the ones which only had physical chains or which had poor websites were the ones which really suffered. So I think now that we're in this second period of locking down, I think that we will see people being more prepared. Some of those habits, they will have become permanent shopping habits that will stick. And I think, especially I mentioned earlier, some of the more elderly shoppers, elderly groups as well, they're going to have, for the first time perhaps, their only experience now will be with online shopping. And I think that again will result in a permanent shift over to online.
So we have the technology, we have the payment systems, we have the connectivity. This is all great for online shopping. One of the problems, however, is tax and duties. First of all, we have a 25% VAT rate in Norway on most products that you buy, which is one of the reasons prices are high here. There are many reasons, but a high VAT rate is one of them, of course. But we also have a very frustrating, from the consumer's perspective, import duty. Now, these laws changed recently. They changed at the beginning of this year, and they are a little bit too complex to dive into the details today. So I will include links in the show notes to the specific rules for people that are interested. But essentially, what this means is if you are buying from a store overseas from Norway, if that store doesn't charge you Norwegian VAT, you then have to pay that VAT plus a substantial import duty when you collect that item from the post office or whatever, and wherever you collect it from. And that can really drive prices up. Now, as I understand it, the purpose of this duty is to promote the interests of shopping within Norway and buying from Norwegian online stores. Given that your job sees you look at e-commerce across Europe, what's your view on Norway's position on these import duties?
Well, I look at it as an observer, especially with everything that's happening with Brexit at the end of this year. And I think that in the UK, we're going to see some similar kind of changes happening. People are very used to being able to order anything they want from any country in the world. And living in Norway, you have that extra doubt and you have a question about what is the real cost here? Is it easier for me just to go over the road and go into that shop and buy it? Or am I going to have to wait a long time to get it delivered? Am I then going to have to go and pay an expensive customs bill and have to go and pick it up in a month's time? So there is that unpredictability. And as you say, those rule changes were designed to make it much easier for people to support local businesses in Norway, but I'm not sure if it's been effective. And I think they even rolled back one of the decisions, which was they were going to abolish the 350 kroner limit. So as long as anything you ordered was lower than 350, you didn't have to pay import tax, import duty. And actually, they decided, no, we're going to leave that in place. So for the smaller items, you can still order as long as it includes the postage, then it's below 350, you're okay. Above that level, you have to factor it in. So I'm not a tax expert. I'm happy that you're going to direct people to the right sources. But my advice to people is double check, have a look on the Norwegian toll website, do the calculation, there's a calculator on there, and work out, make sure there's no nasty surprises.
Yeah. I mean, the way I can summarize it is like this. If you're looking at buying, let's say, a camera from somewhere, a store in the UK, and you live in Norway, that camera's priced at the equivalent of, say, 5,000 kroner, and you look in Norway and you see it's available for 7,000 kroner, you would think you'll be better off buying it from the UK. In actual fact, you'll probably end up paying significantly more by buying that, because you will have to pay a few thousand kroner in VAT and duty to collect that item. So this is the reason this rule exists. But as we were chatting about before the show, this only really works from the consumer's perspective when you can actually get that item in Norway, and the selection in online stores here is not great. And this might be a very niche example, but if you're a British football fan like we are, and we want to buy the replica shirt of our team, Paul, maybe you can get a Southampton shirt in Norway. I'm not sure, but I do know you definitely cannot get a Northampton Town shirt in a Norwegian store. So if I want to buy that £50 shirt, it's about 500 kroner. That's going to end up costing me like 800, maybe even 900. And there's no choice. There's no other way I can get that shirt in Norway. So this law, it's effective in one way potentially, but there are unintended consequences as well. And it's from the consumer's perspective, it's confusing and frustrating, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I think so. And beware, make sure you check and don't have any nasty surprises.
Now, a piece of breaking news, or maybe not breaking news, but very recent news, is the world's biggest retailer is now in Scandinavia. Amazon has opened a store in Sweden, Amazon.se. Now, as far as I'm aware, they don't deliver to Norway. I had a look around the site on launch day, but they are building a substantial logistics network in Sweden. And I think it's fair to assume that if things go well, it's not going to be that difficult for them to expand that logistics network to the west. However, it's been a bit of a bumpy start for them. So what's your perspective on the chances for Amazon to succeed in Scandinavia?
My perspective on it is, first of all, excited, because we've been waiting for 26 years since Amazon started in the US in, 1994? And we've just watched them launch country after country and expand, innovate, come up with, especially on the logistics side, new ways of getting goods to people quicker, same-day deliveries now. And that trust and that experience of being able to just, with one click, know that you're going to have that item delivered to you in the same day is a fantastic experience. So from that side of it, I'm excited. From the point of view of will they be successful, it won't be without challenges. They're going to have to convince Scandinavians that are very used to high quality shopping experience online. They're going to have to convince them to change to Amazon for a lot of their habits to be changed. So part of that, and it's not launched yet, will be the Amazon Prime membership, which if they can get a significant amount of people using that, it creates those habits. And it means that Amazon's the place where you go when you want not just a new camera or a new iPad, but ultimately whatever you need toilet roll, if you need dishwasher tablets, you go there, and it's just every month creates a habit, a recurring purchase on Amazon. And that's really when they have success, is when they get up to that critical mass. So it's going to take them time, and I think they're pragmatic, and they realize that they have to earn that trust of Scandinavian shoppers. To your question about do I think that they will launch and be available in Norway, I think yes, they will at some point. That won't be immediate, as you said, but it will come. I think what that then unlocks is it creates a lot of competition for the local players. And when you think about Norway, it's not just Oslo, it's not just a city, it's the people living in small villages next to the fjord, up in the mountains, over on the coast, on the west coast, as you are, David. How do they deliver and create that same experience for people in hard to reach places? That's going to be where they're going to really innovate. And I've seen drone deliveries, and they're just putting all this money and investment into new ways of thinking about how they get that good, that physical item, to you in the fastest, most efficient way. So exciting. They won't have it all their own way. We've already seen a few bumps in the launch with the translations, which didn't go to plan. And that's maybe a lesson in using a real translator or translation agency to get your translations right. And, some of the other challenges they've had with the labour unions and, like I say, disrupting some of those very established Scandinavian players. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
It will indeed be fascinating, and perhaps in the next 5 or 10 years we will see packet of toilet roll being flown by a drone across a picturesque fjord village. We'll have to wait and see. Paul, last question I have for you is back to Kelkoo. What's it like working for an international company in Oslo? Is your working language English or Norwegian? And what's the makeup of staff and any other interesting bits of info you have about working there?
Well, it's English, yes. So I speak English with my colleagues here, and we will occasionally speak Norwegian as well. So it's a bit of a blend. Sort of Norglish is the blend of languages. But it's in terms of what it is to work in a global company in Oslo, doing business here is really, I would say, straightforward in terms of the culture of having meetings. If you meet with a client, it's very, very friendly environment to do business in. I've had meetings in both Norwegian and in English, and they've both gone equally well, I would say. So, and I see a lot of people moving here for the fact that it's both from the UK, Sweden. It's a very open culture. I think companies are looking for international talent, as are we. We've got a new colleague joining from Denmark, who's moving from Denmark to live in Oslo. So Oslo is an attractive area for talent to move to, and Norway as a whole. And I see a lot of, fantastic companies and startups in the rest of the country as well. So it's a good place to be. Like I say, we've been here for 20 years, and here's to being here for another 20.
Great stuff. Paul, I said that was my last question, but of course I have to ask you the 3 questions that I ask every guest on the Life in Norway show. So quick answers, please. What's the best thing about living in Norway?
I think all the traditions. So many traditions are strong here in Norway, and things like 17th of May. One of my favourite traditions would be Taco Friday. Taco Fredag is, if you like spicy food, getting together is a very cozy tradition that they have every Friday.
And the most challenging or frustrating thing about living here?
One thing about moving here, don't move here in October, because everyone hibernates like hobbits. They disappear for the winter and then they emerge in the spring around March, April. So that's a challenge.
And finally, your favourite place in Norway?
I have to say Ålesund on the west coast, because my in-laws would kill me if I said anywhere else. It's beautiful, picture postcard, pretty, and it's where I got married. So Ålesund is on a lot of people's bucket lists, and I highly recommend visiting.
Yeah, although you have to say it is a fair choice. It is a beautiful place, and I take every chance I have of heading there as well. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. Where can people find out about Kelkoo and find you online if they have any questions?
Yeah, so on the website is kelkoogroup.com, and you can contact me on LinkedIn.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, David.